Hello and welcome to Tulpa Time. I'm your host, Lyrical. This is a podcast about tulpamancy. My guest here today is...
Longbow. How's it going?
How are you guys doing? This is our first podcast, and it's about the phenomena known as tulpamancy. It's very popular in certain niches of the internet. Not a lot's known about it by the general public. And I myself have been doing it for almost 5 years. How about you, Longbow?
I've been doing it for over 4 years now.
Yeah. So basically, the way this is going to work is these podcasts, we're going to talk about certain subjects of tulpamancy. We're going to discuss our opinions on it. Everything in this podcast is subjective. There's no way you should believe that anything here is written in stone or is law, because tulpamancy itself is a very subjective experience.
Indeed. Very subjective.
It's different from me than it would be for anyone else. So basically, I'm going to start out with the obvious question. What is tulpamancy? What are tulpa?
What the heck is this thing? This tulpa thing.
I'm actually asking you the question. What are tulpa in your opinion?
What are tulpa?
What is tulpamancy? What are tulpas?
Tulpamancy is a phenomenon where a person, through certain meditative practices, creates a separate sentient consciousness within their own mind. This separate sentient consciousness has their own emotions, memories, will. They have their own thoughts. They experience their own emotions. In every way except physical, they are like another human. Except they do not have a physical form. They instead have an appearance that it's called a form, but it is only seen through the host's inner senses, in the mind's eye, or through hallucinations. But that's more advanced.
That's pretty much what I was gonna say. In a manner of speaking, that was a very, very technical dictionary definition of it. Basically, if there was one, that's what it would be. So yeah, like you were saying, it's a phenomenon where you create, through sheer force of will, meditation, and focusing, you create another being, and this has oftentimes been misconstrued or mislabeled in a way as adults with imaginary friends.
Either that or giving yourself schizophrenia, just for the fun of it.
Which is totally redundant, because you don't, well, I don't know if redundant's the proper wordage there, but it's not the way schizophrenia works. Schizophrenia isn't self-given. It's a diagnosis. You get it from, external factors. You don't just give yourself schizophrenia. But,
well, in a certain sense.
Yeah. But, tulpa are, like a lot of people said, they're kind of like that. The only difference is, whenever you take this being and you create it through by believing it's there and making it be there in your mind, in time it starts to take on a will of its own. It makes its own decisions. It has its own rational thought. And this may sound to some people like, oh yeah, you're crazy.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we are crazy, but not that crazy.
Everybody is crazy is a spectrum. Everybody's crazy to some extent. It's true. Everybody's crazy to some extent.
Yeah, but in all seriousness, as crazy as it sounds, it is a real phenomenon. We take it very seriously. We
not too seriously.
Well, I mean, serious enough. And we have been in a community of people like us who participate in this phenomenon for a long time, and there are very many other people who believe the same thing.
Alright, so now that you've got the somewhat, like I said, totally subjective definition, this is what it means to us. This is what they are to us. I'm a firm believer that everything in life is subjective. We can only experience things through our own lenses, through the way we want to, we experience things.
Yes.
So, our definition is subjective, just like everything else to do with this practice. It's not a cult. We're not going to make you drink punch. You don't have to... if you see someone, talking about tulpamancy, or they claim to have a tulpa, and you choose not to believe it, that's totally fine. If you can,
Yeah.
you can go about doing your own thing. No
That-
one's trying to convert you.
That's definitely true. I mean, coming into this with skepticism, I would recommend it.
I'd recommend you go into everything in life with skepticism.
Yeah.
Honestly.
That is true. Question everything.
Yeah. But as I was saying, yeah, just to take away, anything from this, I would say that it is truly a subjective experience, but I don't recommend. Well, actually, I do recommend trying it. Like even if you do think it's a little crazy, take 10 minutes out of your day and just meditate. That's still healthy, Because what my personal experience was, and I'll ask you yours in just a second, was I found it online. I'm not going to mention where, but I found it online, and I met it with total and complete skepticism. And I was like, what is it? What is this? These people are crazy. They're giving themselves schizophrenia. I was one of those people. Excuse me. And I believed that it was all hogwash. But then, over time, I started to be like, well, what if they're onto something? What if this is real? The seed had been planted from the moment I questioned, because I'm a very open-minded person, obviously. But the seed had been planted when I started to question, what if this isn't all just bullshit and attention-seeking behavior and schizophrenia and all that? And basically from there, I started trying it, and then I didn't really feel anything for the longest time, and I thought, well, it's healthy to meditate anyway, so what's the harm, right? I'm still meditating. That's a positive thing to do with your life. It helps you lower your stress. It's good for your heart. It's good for everything. And then I started to get little emotional responses that weren't my own. They were completely foreign. And they came out of nowhere, and they were stimulated by random things. Music that would come on the radio that I didn't even particularly like.
Yeah.
I would be all of a sudden elated to hear, and it would come from a foreign place in my brain.
It was alien.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like it was coming from your own self.
Which is totally a really surreal experience. But anyway, what was your experience of discovering this phenomenon? And
Well, I saw it on the internet on some message boards. And at first, I had the very same initial reaction.
Oh, you saw it on Fortune 9gag Chan Reddit blur?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good site.
That one. I love it. .org.
Really, .gov. .internet.
But anyway, I saw it at first, and I thought, what is this? It was the internet, so I know there's a lot of crazy shit out there. But this kind of, took it a little too far. It's kind of one of those things you see people doing, and you're just like, I can't understand this. How would anyone think this is cool to do? I don't understand it. And another thing that kind of off-put me about it is that a lot of people were getting really excited about it because it allowed them to basically have a character from a TV show or a video game that would hang out with them and be their friend. And it seemed like, oh, this is just, pathetic wish fulfillment.
That's what a lot of people would think, yeah. On the surface level.
Yes, I'm not going to try to argue that that's not how it appears, because it is.
Yeah.
But, so I immediately kind of saw this kind of from a cursory glance.
Yeah.
And I just kind of dismissed it. I just ignored it.
And the website you were on was just more confirmation bias, because the people who frequented this website were the type of people who would do something like this.
Yes,
Yeah.
they do not tend to tell the truth, to put it lightly.
Those Fortune 9gag Chan Reddit blur.
Yeah, they like to
Yikes.
do a little bit of the, how you say, trolling.
Yeah, yeah,
They like to be trolls.
yeah.
So it was very, very natural for me to dismiss this.
Yeah.
However, over the course of time, months and months, I kept seeing it come up on certain threads.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just glance over it, ignore it. And I just kept seeing it over and over and over and over again.
But by then the seed had been planted, right?
Yeah.
You were curious about it.
In the back of my head, I knew, this is interesting. I don't really understand, what the draw is, but there's something to this. And eventually, just one night bored, I just decided to start reading about it.
Mm-hmm. Classic story.
Yeah. That's it.
Curiosity killed the cat. Satisfaction brought him back.
And I just started reading about it. I read some guides to tulpomancy, how to create a tulpa. I read about people's experiences with it. And another bunch of things. I read... pretty much one of the first things I read was like a series of frequently asked questions about tulpas.
Yeah. It's usually the first place you go after you initially discover it. You're like, well, they always in this place where this image board per se, they would always copy.
Can we just say it? It's
They would always copy and paste the same thing in the beginning of every thread, and we would see it, and that's what you would see, and you'd be like, well, I guess I'll use the resources they're providing, to see what the hell this is. So you go there. And then you start reading up on it, and you're like, oh, there's more crazy people.
But, after reading it for a while, not for everyone, but for me and you, you just kind of... It starts to make sense. You kind of see how it's structured. I mean, it still is subjective, but there is a certain sort of logic and rationality behind it.
Mm-hmm. And it's all apparently tied into the original tulpomancy was actually Tibetan meditation practice.
Yeah, Tibetan Buddhism.
Yeah, for Tibetan Buddhism. But no one that does it nowadays, I dare say, if there is anyone that does it nowadays, I'm fairly sure, you can never be 100% certain in this world, but I'm fairly sure they don't do it the actual Tibetan Buddhist methods.
I've read a bit about it, and it differs in many ways, but it's still interesting to see kind of the similarities and how the word, the etymology, if you would, kind of entered the Western culture. So, yeah, I don't know what to talk about.
Oh, well, if you're done, then just give it back to me. I got the next thing. So basically, when you're starting to create a tulpa, you're going to do something called forcing. And now that we've told you kind of what they are, we'll tell you the methods. Well, this is going to be a brief introduction. We're not going to do... If we were going to talk about every aspect of tulpomancy, it would take 17 hours of nonstop talking, and frankly, I don't want to talk that much. So
we probably will over the course of this podcast.
Yeah, of course. But I mean, like, for this first introduction. So we'll go with what is, like, forcing. Okay, so...
I'm sorry.
Bless you. So fucking unprofessional. Jesus Christ. Anyway.
Okay, I'm done.
So, forcing. Forcing is basically... There's two different types as subjectively defined by most tulpomancers. There's inactive forcing, there's active forcing and passive forcing. Okay, active forcing is sitting down or laying down, whatever, finding a place where you can be stationary and concentrate. And that's when you're actively trying to build your tulpa, so to speak, build in quotation marks. This is where you're going to try and visualize their form. And we're going to later on break down each aspect of what you're doing. I'm just basically giving you an overview of what you do when you force. You're going to visualize their form. You're going to narrate to them, which is talking to them, trying to get them to respond via either emotional responses or verbal responses, which don't be surprised if those come much later, because you literally have to do auditory hallucination to hear their voice.
Yeah, as if it's coming from an external thing.
Yeah. Which it'll always kind of sound like it's in your head anyway. But anyway, then there's touch, and then there's smell, and basically all these add up to a term that's been known as imposition, because you're going to impose your tulpa's form onto reality, onto the external world.
Just kind of like you would impose one photographic image over another. This is kind of in the same vein, except you're imposing the perception of your tulpa, your internal perception, over your external perceptions of the world.
Like taking a PNG image and pasting it over top of an image of a landscape. Kind of like that, in a very simplistic way to put it. But yeah, those are several of the, well, pretty much all the aspects of active forcing. Now, passive forcing, I'm going to let you define.
Passive forcing,
Subjectively,
is when you are focused on other things, you're going about your day, and you're also keeping your tulpa in mind, or you're aware of their presence, or you're like subtly communicating to them, although you're still doing things in your daily life. A good example would be like going for a walk down to the store and to get like a sody pop. You are walking down the sidewalk, but you can communicate to your tulpa internally using what's called mind voice.
Yeah, basically speaking to them in your head. Because if you speak to them out loud, let's just be honest here. If you speak to them out loud when you're walking down the street, people are going to think you're insane.
Yeah, it's not a good social sort of situation. So you use these inner vocalizations, and they communicate back with you, and you can have a conversation, even though externally it just seems like you're walking down the street. And you can also, perceive them visually in your mind as you're going about your day. Just kind of like taking kind of cursory glances, seeing their body language or gestures. Another good example of passive forcing would be like playing a video game and talking to the tulpa as you're just going through it, just commenting on things that happen in the game, like one of your famous Let's Players, like Markiplier.
That aside, another popular method that I've heard of often is people driving in their car and their tulpa riding in the passenger seat, and they sing along to music with them.
Yeah.
That's almost like blending active and passive forcing at the same time. Usually that kind of passive forcing won't come along until you've gotten to the point where you can hear your tulpa, obviously, or at least, maybe visualize them.
Well, I would say, it's kind of up in the air. I mean, you can still talk to your tulpa even though they can't talk back. But basically, the distinction that we're trying to make here is active forcing is giving your whole attention to the tulpa with nothing else going on, just like sitting and meditating.
And in the beginning, it's more about creation
than
anything else. Then later on, it's just spending time with them, like one-on-one.
And passive is just doing other things while some of your attention is directed towards your tulpa.
Yeah. So, basically, in review of what we've talked about today on this brief podcast here, this is just like an introduction, so I don't want to go into too many details of each thing just yet. I'd rather just make this sort of an introduction. We've learned that tulpamancy is a subjective experience. It is creating another consciousness or being through thought, through willpower, and just focusing and creating this being. And you're focusing on every aspect of who they are, what they are. You implant a personality. We've also talked about how forcing is the methods you use to create your tulpa. And that can be both passive and active. And those two are the main methods. We've also talked about how on the outside, this can seem like a strange and very new age phenomenon that people are kind of like skeptical about, which, it's your right to be skeptical.
It's totally healthy.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with being skeptical. I don't like personally when you dive into an ideology or anything like that without questioning it first, or
at least really learning about it, really thinking about it.
Research, you know. There's nothing wrong with being armed with knowledge. And another thing, this is not us trying to convert you. This is not a religion. This is just a meditation practice. And another thing that's pretty important to know is a lot of people use this for self-improvement. And that's going to be the last topic we talk about in this introduction. Is self-improvement.
So there's a lot of kind of skepticism I feel about this as well. Like, how is having like some sort of figure around you gonna help you, right? And I admit, it doesn't seem like it's that great of an idea at first, but just hear us out. So one of the biggest things that people need to understand is that your mind is a complicated place. Not everyone is fully aware of all the things going on in your mind,
to say the least.
Yeah, there's a lot going on underneath the surface, and you might think, oh, I'm completely in control of everything that's happening. I know every little thing that comes up in my head. That's just, I'm sorry to say, it's just not true.
Yeah.
Everyone has intrusive thoughts. Everyone has these things where they're like just going about their day, and something really weird.
Why the fuck did I think that?
Yeah,
exactly.
just something like really crazy, and it affects you, and you're not sure why, and you want to question it, and you kind of like keep bringing it up in your head. It's very common, and I feel, and many others do, that tulpomancy is a way to kind of explore this inner space that you have in your mind. Yeah. This sort of, vast ocean of all of your memories, of your emotions, your experiences, like everything you've ever done in your life is in your head, and it's powering your personality, it's powering your dreams, your hopes and emotions, and there's a lot in there.
Yeah, to say the least. See, the reason why I would say that a lot of people, the people who do use tulpomancy as a means of self-improvement and self-discovery, the main way they do that is if you create a being that knows you better than anyone else, and you unconsciously are doing something that you don't really think of. You repeat this process over and over. You doubt yourself a lot, or you don't believe you can do this,
or you get anxious in social situations.
Your tulpa can help you with that. They can help you overcome these, because they are a separate consciousness. They have their own desires, their own wants, their own goals, their own loves, their own hates.
Yeah, and with this kind of separateness, they have a separate kind of perception of what's going on inside your head.
They can tell you things about yourself that you might not have really thought. You might have thought it subconsciously, or you might have thought it, every now and then. But your tulpa can be like, "Hey, we need to talk about this. We need to talk about why you feel the way you do, why you act the way you do." And in doing that, you can discover a lot about yourself, and you can discover, oh man, I do doubt myself a lot more than I thought I did. I do blame myself for everything.
Yeah. Or I am really caught up on this, and I really do need to work past it. And that is to be said. All of these kind of things that tulpa will help you with is always coming from a place of love and trust. That's one of the main foundations of the relationship between a tulpomancer and his tulpa, is just this sort of unconditional love.
Yeah, because we'll talk about this in another episode. Tulpa creepypastas. That's going to be a good spooky episode.
Oh, yeah.
But there's no reason why a being that you create would hate you and want you to suffer. I cannot think that would go against self-preservation.
Yeah, it would be inherently self-destructive if a being in your mind wants to do harm to you.
Yeah.
If they hurt you, they're hurting themselves.
And we'll go into this. We'll go more into the detail on this in another episode.
Yeah.
About the cautionary tales of tulpomancy and the spooky trend. I heard about what happened. A guy's tulpa possessed him and he ran over someone, and tulpa are demons that come into your body.
All the myths.
We'll talk about that. Yeah, we'll talk about that later, but in summation, wrapping this up, tulpomancy is a wonderful experience that we are going to try and do our best in this podcast to bring to you in a way that you can understand and in a way that you can relate to, because it may seem very strange, but the two of us sitting here are fully functional adults with good social lives, friends.
We have jobs. We
Jobs.
go see our families. We, talk to our real life friends.
We're not stereotypical basement-dwelling neats with nothing to add to society, and that's a stereotype that we're also going to dispel later in this podcast.
We don't have any dakimakuras in our bedroom,
Yet. I'm kidding. But no, we're actually fully functional adults talking to you about this with fully functional brains. I know it's so hard to believe talking about creating a being out of your consciousness. These guys have got to be crazy, right? But no, we're not.
But,
so.
You can still be skeptical about that.
Be skeptical all you want. It's healthy. Skepticism is healthy. But yeah, that concludes. We'll see you next time. That concludes the first ever podcast, Tulpa Time.
Tulpa Time.
I am your host, Lyrical, and this has been my guest, and he's going to be a repeat guest. I don't even know why I didn't say co-host, but this is my co-host / repeat guest.
I am Longbow.
And we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.